So cytogenetics, this is the study of the physical size and structure of the chromosomes. It is also a specialized laboratory discipline that examines the structure and behavior of chromosomes at the cellular level. The karyotype is the complete set of chromosomes in the cells of an organism. We have 23 pairs of chromosomes, 22 of which are somatic pairs and 1 pair of sex chromosomes. Changes in the karyotype correlates with the changes in the phenotype. So clinical cytogenetics will show you that cytogenetic abnormalities may be found in apparently normal individuals, patients with phenotypic anomalies, and patients with diagnosed genetic disorders. Apparently normal individuals because less than 25% of adults have genetic abnormalities, okay? And patients with genetic anomalies, they usually have also genetic abnormalities. Patients with diagnosed genetic disorders, those whose genetic disorders has already been confirmed by genetic testing. So testing may be done during the prenatal period. This is usually done in utero, okay, when the patients are still within the uterus of the mother, okay. Secondly, during the postnatal period after birth, and thirdly, during childhood and adulthood. So these are the indications for prenatal cytogenetics, okay. One, we want to screen for maternal age-related risk, no? So mothers who have their first baby after the age of 35 are usually have increased risk for your trisomies. Second, family history of a previous child with chromosomal abnormalities, because usually these are hereditary, and there are really some cases of Down syndrome wherein two children among the siblings manifest the abnormality. The abnormal levels of alpha-fetoprotein in screening tests, because this is usually associated with neural tube defects. Third, abnormality detected during ultrasound. So usually, example of these are anencephaly. This can be seen on ultrasound. Okay. A parent is a carrier of unbalanced gametes also have a high chance of having children with genetic abnormalities. A parent who is a carrier of X-linked genetic disorders, we know that male child or male infant will usually manifest your X-linked genetic disorders. And of course, we want to know whether they might have this abnormality. So these are the different forms of neural tube defects that you may see in patients with elevated alpha-fetoprotein. You have your craniobrachyscesis, okay? You have a completely open brain and spinal cord. You have your anencephaly, open brain and lack of skull vault. Encephalocele, wherein you have herniation of the meningocele or meninges and the brain. Your ionencephaly, occipital skull and spine defects with extreme retroflexion of the head. Third, spina bifida occulta, a close asymptomatic neural tube defect in which some of the vertebrae are not completely closed. Closed spinal dysraphism, deficiency of at least two vertebral discs or arches. But in this particular picture, this is covered with a lipoma. Your meningocele, wherein you have protrusion of the meninges filled with CSF, so a defect in the skull or spine. Then your myelomeningocele, wherein you have an open spinal cord with a meningeal cyst. Okay, so in contrast, these are the different indications for postnatal cytogenetics. First, presence of multiple congenital anomalies. So baby is born and you see that you have multiple congenital anomalies that are present. So of course you can do cytogenetic studies in order to determine what type of genetic abnormality is present. And of course, secondly, patients who are suspected of aneuploidy. Okay, so if you already see at birth that the baby have pictures of any one of the trisomies, like for example, your Brown syndrome, you can already perform your cytogenetic studies. For adult and childhood cytogenetics, so these are already young children and adults. The genetic abnormalities manifest much later in life, and they usually are identified when the babies or the adult manifest unexplained mental retardation, developmental delay. Okay, so we watch for the different milestones of your infants and then observe whether they are occurring at the right time. Suspected unbalanced autosomes, so patients who have Prader-Willi syndrome, okay, if they are manifesting obesity and uh, a lot of appetite to eat, then think of an unbalanced autosome. Suspected sex chromosomal abnormalities, like for example, Turner syndrome. Okay, so these babies usually have abnormal genital manifestations. Suspected Fragile X syndrome. So these babies, as they grow older, they manifest different abnormalities. And then infertility, to rule out 6 chromosomal abnormality as a cause of it. And then, of course, when you have history of multiple spontaneous abortions, in order to rule out the parents as carrier of balanced translocation, where both parents should be evaluated. Okay, so how do we do your classical cytogenetics? Okay, so we do chromosome bonding technique. And this usually will tell us the number of chromosomes, the length of the chromosome, the location of the centromeres, and the bonding pattern. These are the different characteristics of the chromosomes that we want to observe during our chromosome bonding technique. Of course, other changes in the chromosomes, like your structural changes, no insertions, deletions, okay, your ring chromosome abnormalities, this can be observed in your chromosome bonding technique. So these chromosomes are usually treated with a dye that stains the DNA. And this length of the chromosome will take on different degrees of staining. No? There are some lightly stained regions and there are some darkly stained regions. So the lightly stained regions are called the euchromatin, and the darkly stained regions are your heterochromatin. Okay. So there are two principal groups of chromosome bonding technique. One, which involves formation of bands along the whole length of the chromosome. Example of these are your G, Q, and R bonding, your GIMSA, kinacrin, and reverse banding. And then secondly, your restricted number of specific bands or structures, wherein only a portion of the chromosome is being stained. No? Your centromeric or C bands and their nucleolus organizer regions or NORs. So the G banding technique uses your GIMSA stain, and this is the most popular of all the banding techniques. So the G bands are those areas which takes on the dark color. These are the dark bands, and they are usually heterochromatic. No, they contain your base pair adenine and thymine, and these are also the late replicating base, no, the late replicating base. In contrast, the G bands are your negative G bands are your pale bands or your bright bands, and these are euchromatic, and they are usually rich in guanine and cytosine, and these are the early replicating bands. Okay. Okay, so your kinacrin bands uses fluorochrome stain, and they usually also take on the same bonding pattern as your GIMSA stain. No? The dark bands are the heterochromatin, and the pale bands are the euchromatin. In contrast, your R bonding technique is the reverse of this. No, so in our bonding techniques, the R bands are the light or pale staining bands, which are euchromatic, and the dark bands are your or ito yung ano, yung light bands are your R bands and eochromatic, no? They are dark dito sa ano sa R staining technique. Opposite kasi siya. And the dark bands are the light bands are your heterochromatic. Okay. Yung dark iyo, ang light yun ang hetero. Okay. Okay. So these are the different specimens that are used for your classical cytogenetic techniques. The most commonly preferred specimen for thin cytogenetic studies for adults and children is your heparinized peripheral blood. Now, this is because easy to secure a sample of your peripheral blood. Of course, you can also use your bone marrow aspirates. Okay, they are usually used for studying hematologic disorders. And then for fibroblast cultures, we get a skin biopsies, the kidney, liver, muscle, and lung are excellent sources if obtained soon after birth. So these are usually the babies who have died in utero and or from a fetal loss. So during autopsy, you can get sample of this in order to determine whether genetic abnormalities is present among this patient. Other examples are your amniotic fluid. These are the most common specimen for prenatal analysis. Okay. But you can also do chorionic villus sampling from your developing placenta during the prenatal analysis. And you can also use your fetal blood from the umbilical cord. This is useful in rapid karyotyping. Okay. So how do we do classical cytogenetics? So one of the things that we have to do is your cell culture. No? We have to prepare the chromosome. And we have to do cell culture and harvesting. So in this process, we have to initiate or the cells to go into active cell division. Okay, so the first step is adding your mitogenic stimulating agents. Okay, so that cell division will take place. Okay, and this is done by adding your phytohemagglutinin. Okay, so after which we arrest the mitosis on the metaphase plates stage, no? And we do this by adding colcimid, no? So we want the chromosomes to be at the metaphase stage of cell division, okay, for the study. Okay, after this, the cells are subjected to hypotonic solution in order to swell the cell by adding 0.075 mole of potassium chloride. This will further disperse the chromosomes within the cell, and it will lyse any red cell that is present. And then the swollen cells are fixed using your modified Carnoy's fixative, okay? And then the fixed cells are dropped on a clean microscope slide. This will mechanically break the membranes, the cell membranes, and leave the chromosomes separated slightly from each other, okay? Next is either you can do in an aging step, no, wherein you keep the cells at 65 degrees centigrade for 30 to 60 minutes. This will improve the staining property of the chromosomes. And then you do your staining, okay, after which you do your photomicroscopy. You take pictures of the chromosomes that has already been stained either with GIMSA or usually GIMSA stain, no? And then we cut the pictures of the chromosomes, pair them, and arrange them from chromosome 1 to 22, and then the sex chromosome, and then do the reporting using the International System of Cytogenetic Nomenclature. So this is a flow chart how your classical cytogenetic technique is done. Okay, so we said we have to prepare a cell culture. Okay, and you usually do this by adding phytohemagglutinin in order to incite the cell to undergo mitosis. Okay. And then we arrest the cell division at metaphase by adding colcimid. Okay. And then we add potassium chloride, 0.075 mole, in order to induce swelling, to separate the chromosome from one another. And then we fix it using Carnoy's reagent. Okay. Your fixative will be Carnoy's. And then we try to break it mechanically by putting it or dropping it on a slide. This will cause breaking down of your nuclear membrane, and then we'll separate the chromosome further. And then next, we can either age your chromosome by storing them at 30 to 60 degrees for about 30 to 60 minutes. 65 degrees centigrade for 30 to 60 minutes, and then do your gene sustaining. And then we take pictures of our chromosome spread, okay, photomicroscopy, and then cut them, okay, and pair them and arrange them from chromosome 1 to chromosome 22, and then your sex chromosome, and report them using your international nomenclature for your the National System of Cytogenetic Nomenclature. Okay. So this is an example of a normal female karyotype. So you know that this is a female because of the double X chromosome. The sex chromosomal complements are 2 X's. Okay, so all of the chromosomes are in pairs. Okay, 1 to 22. And this is a patient with chromosome 21. Okay, so you have 3 copies of chromosome 21, and this is a male. Okay, you have 1 X chromosome and 1 Y chromosome. Okay, the other chromosomes are normal. Now let's go to your molecular techniques. So molecular techniques uses your DNA, no, your nucleic acid. And one of these is your nucleic acid amplification technology. So there are 3 forms of nucleic acid amplification technology. You have your target amplification, you have your probe amplification, and you have your signal amplification. Okay. For the target amplification, we usually use a single or multiple enzymes, okay, which synthesizes copies of the target nucleic acid. And one of the most popular example of this is your polymerase chain reaction. Okay, so polymerase chain reaction is the most mature and widely used nucleic acid amplification method. Okay, this is an in vivo clinical reaction that permits the synthesis of essentially limitless quantities of targeted nucleic acid sequence. And you usually use a deoxynucleic acid polymerase in order to do this. The second form is your probe amplification. And the amplification procedure involves formation of amplification products, which contains a sequence which is present only in the initial probes. Okay, so it is the probes that you want to amplify and identify in this method. Okay, so this is usually used to perform diagnostic amplifications for the detection of high risk genotypes of human papilloma virus. Now, this is one of the application of probe amplification. Okay? Ito yung isang test na it is based on probe amplification. Okay? So diagnosis of your HPV viruses in cervical samples. The third one is signal amplification. The signal amplification method, in this method, the concentration of the probe or target does not increase. Okay? It is the concentration of the labeled molecules attached to the target nucleic acid that increases. Okay? Yung labeled molecules. Okay? And this usually entails the use of multiple enzymes and probes, okay, with reduction of background noise in order to enhance the target detection. Okay, so sa signal amplification, yung labeled molecules are the ones that are amplified, no? And this requires multiple enzymes and probes. But at the same time, you have to reduce the background noise to enhance target detection. Okay, so PCR, okay, this is the most popular and as I said, the most mature. It is a simple in vitro chemical reaction that permits the synthesis of essentially limitless quantities of targeted nucleic acid sequence. Okay. And it consists of the following. Of course, you have to have a target DNA sequence. Okay. And then you have to have 2 oligonucleotide primers. Okay. The oligonucleotide primer will flank the sequence to be amplified. And usually it is 18 to 30 bases long. And it is complementary to the opposite strands of the target DNA. You also need a heat-stable DNA polymerase. No? It should have an optimum temperature of 70 degrees centigrade. And of course, you need an equimolar mixture of deoxyribonucleotide triphosphates, your DATP, adenine triphosphatase, your cytosine, guanine, and thymidine triphosphatase. This will serve as the backbone of your nucleotides, or the building blocks from which your DNA polymerase synthesizes a new DNA strand. In addition, you will need a magnesium chloride, which is a diion. Okay. This is a divalent cations. You'll also chloride, a monovalent cations, and tris HCl buffer, which will provide a suitable chemical environment for optimum activity and stability of the DNA polymerase. And then, of course, you'll need this one, the thin-walled PCR tube, which will permit favorable thermal conductivity to allow for rapid thermal equilibrium in a thermal cycler. Okay. These are the different steps in your PCR cycle. Okay. So the first one is denaturation, no? Denaturation steps. And this usually occurs at a temperature of 94 to 98 degrees centigrade for about 20 to 30 seconds. Okay. So during this step, the reaction mixture is heated to separate the 2 strands of target DNA. This is the purpose of denaturation. Okay. To separate the 2 strands of target DNA. This is followed by annealing, which occurs at 50 to 65 degrees centigrade for 20 to 60 seconds. The cooling will permit the primers to anneal to the target DNA in a sequence-specific manner. And the polymerase enzyme will also bind to the primer template hybrid and begins your DNA synthesis. The third step is elongation or extension, which occurs at 72 degrees centigrade. And during this period, your DNA polymerase synthesizes a new DNA strand complementary to the DNA's template in a 5' to 3' direction. At the end of its cycle, so at the end of these three steps, which is a cycle, the PCR products are theoretically doubled. Okay? Kasi nag-ano ka dito eh. You produce 2 strands here, tapos you elongate and produce a hybrid. Okay? So at the end of its cycle, your PCR products are theoretically doubled. Okay? And after 20 cycles, a million-fold amplification is achieved. You'll have a million copies of your targeted DNA. And after 30 cycles, a billion-fold. Okay? So it's a very rapid procedure, no? Kasi seconds lang yan eh. During the final elongation, which is usually at 70 to 74 degrees centigrade, 5 to 15 minutes is allowed, no, after the last PCR cycle in order for this to take place. Kaya meron ka pang final elongation. Ahaba pa siya. Okay. And there is also what they call a final hold at 4 to 15 degrees centigrade for indefinite time for short-term storage of the reaction. Okay. So this is a flow chart of your PCR cycle. Okay. So this is the first step, which is your denaturation. Okay. 94 to 98 degrees centigrade. Okay. You want to separate the 2 strands of DNA. So you end up with 2 strands of DNA. Okay. These are your denatured DNA. Then the second phase, you bring down the temperature to 50 to 68 degrees so that you will have annealing of your polymerase, okay, and annealing of your primers to the target DNA, okay. And then this is also the time that your polymerase will bind, no? And then the third is your extension, wherein you have elongation with formation of your hybrid DNA. No? So the DNA polymerase synthesizes a new DNA strand, which is complementary to your DNA template at a 5' to 3' direction. Okay, so this is your first cycle. Then after that, the cycle is repeated all over again. So from 1 becomes 2, from 2 it becomes 4, and then so on and so forth. Okay, until you form a million or billion folds of amplified DNA sequence. Okay. Another method is called the reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction, wherein the amplified nucleic acid is your ribonucleic acid targets. Okay. So this involves converse or formation of your complementary DNA copies from your target RNA using your reverse transcription. And then the complementary DNA is amplified by PCR. Okay. So this method is usually used for detection and quantification of hepatitis C virus, which is an RNA virus, and your HIV-1 virus. Okay. The other method is your multiplex polymerase chain reaction, wherein 2 or more primer sets are used for amplification of different targets in the same reaction mixture. Okay, so multiple primers are being used here and being amplified in the same reaction mixture. And then we have the real time or your homogeneous or kinetic polymerase chain reaction. So in here, you have target amplification and detection steps occurring simultaneously in the same tube. That is why it is called a homogeneous polymerase chain reaction. So the PCR product is detected as it is produced, and that is why it's called a real time. No? So as it is produced, it's already identified. And the fluorescent dyes are utilized that preferentially binds to your double-stranded DNA. Okay, so this method decreases the time required to perform nucleic acid assays because there are no post-PCR processing steps because it's already done alongside with your amplification. The detection is already done alongside your amplification. Okay, now let's go to your hybridization assays. So your hybridization assays utilize probes which are well characterized fragments of nucleic acid. They are large enough to hybridize with your target, but not large enough to inhibit or prevent hybridization. And these hybridization assays can be applied to your chromosome spread. No? So, ito na mismong chromosome ang being utilized. No? So they undergo different steps wherein you have also denaturation. Okay, there are a lot of well-characterized probes, no, available na siya in the market, and these probes are usually labeled with fluorescent dye. Mas common na dati kasi they are also using radioactive materials, no, but currently fluorescent dye is the most popular probe, no, to identify your DNA. And of course, it also undergoes denaturation and then later on hybridization. Okay, so your fish is used to detect and localize the presence or absence of a specific DNA sequence on the chromosome. Okay, so you already know your target chromosome. There are available probes now for this, or you can synthesize your own probe, and then you can use it for your hybridization process. So in cases where you already know the sequence, no, yan, but you do not know where in the chromosome the gene is located, or if you already suspect that there has been a translocation in a chromosome, then you can use this fluorescent in situ hybridization to identify the chromosome in question and localize the exact area where your gene is supposed to be present, no? Your gene that is seek for. No? So the fluorescent probes binds only to those parts of the chromosomes which may show a high degree of sequential similarities. No? And fluorescence microscopy is used to find out where the fluorescent probe is bound to the chromosome. Use fluorescence microscopy. So you have to have a complementary DNA probes labeled with fluorescent dye or fluoroform for the sequence of interest. Okay, so you have to construct it if it's not yet available. And then the chromosomes are placed in a microscope slide, denatured, okay, either using heat, chemicals, or changes in pH to produce your single strands of DNA. And then you add your labeled probe, it will hybridize, form hydrogen bonds to your complementary single-stranded DNA, and then you try to demonstrate the presence of the probe, okay, using fluorescent signals in the microscope. No? You use a fluorescent microscope in order to identify the binding of the probe with your DNA, depending on how many sites it can hybridize. No? So you can identify different chromosomes or targeted chromosome regions to identify your trisomies, translocations, or deletions which are not visible with ordinary microscope. Okay. But if you do fish, you can see all of this. So FISH actually complements your classical cytogenetic analysis. So you apply your FISH with your chromosome spread. So it is also used to diagnose, evaluate prognosis, or evaluate remission of a disease such as cancer. Can identify numerical aberrations or translocation in chromosomes. It can be used to guide cancer treatment. So it can identify your targets. Okay, like for example, your HER2 can be identified using FISH, and therefore, if they are present, you can use your targeted therapy, your Herceptin therapy, which will work against your HER2. And then to detect infectious diseases caused by microbials and parasites, those microbes that are difficult to culture, okay, and parasites that are usually located intracellularly. Okay, so this is an example of FISH. It has been used to identify your Philadelphia chromosome. So Philadelphia chromosome is formed by the fusion of your ABL-BCR gene. No? So the ABL gene comes from your chromosome 9, your BCR gene in chromosome 22. So when the two undergoes translocation, you have fusion of your ABL, BCR-ABL fusion gene in your chromosome 22. And that is your Philadelphia chromosome, and this is usually seen in chronic myelogenous leukemia. So this is the FISH that has been used, okay? So the chromosome fluorescent level that has been used is green for your BCR, okay, which is located in your chromosome 22, and red for your ABL, which is located in your chromosome 9. So if you have normal copies of BCR and ABL, you have to see two copies of green, referring to your two chromosome 22, and 2 ABL, referring to your 2 chromosome 9. Okay, but if you have fusion in one copy of your chromosome 9 and 22, what you will see is this one. The second copy will show a fusion of your BCR ABL gene. So the green and the red color will fuse to form a yellow color. Okay, so the formation of a yellow color means that you have a fusion of your ABL BCR or BCR ABL gene in your green, which is your chromosome 22. Okay, chromosome 22. This is another use of your FISH, wherein you have labeled your chromosome 13 with a red color, and your chromosome 21 with a green color. So you can see that there are 3 red colors. So it means that you have a trisomy of chromosome 13, and you have a normal copy of your chromosome 21. Okay. Another example, here you have 2 labels. One label for the telomeric end of the chromosome. This will identify the chromosome. And one label for the gene of interest. No? So in this copy, you have both fluorescing, okay? But the other one, you have deletion of your gene of interest. So meron kang deletion sa second copy. This is one of the most interesting application of your FISH. No? This is your SCAI, no? Spectral karyotyping, wherein all the chromosomes are labeled differentially. Okay, so using this, you can easily identify the chromosome. They just look for the chromosome with the same color appearance. No, itong dalawang to, you know that they are the same chromosome. They are the copies of 2 chromosomes. Okay, this one and this one are 2 copies of the same chromosome. Okay, this one and this one, I guess, are 2 copies. Yeah, 2 copies. So it's easy to identify their partners, no, even if they are part apart. Okay, I think this one and that one are the same copies. Okay. Ito, tsaka yan. Okay, so you end up with this chromosome spread. So they have different colors, different lengths. You look at the centromere, okay, they are of the same location. These are the basis in arranging your chromosomes. No? The length, the location of the centromere, and the banding, the bands, how the bands are arranged. Okay. Now let's go to flow cytometry. Okay. So flow cytometry involves the injection of a dispersed suspension of particles or cells into the center of a flowing stream of fluids, or also known as sheet. So they pass through a small quartz capillary tube at a constant velocity. Single file yan, ha? And as they do that, they cause a scattering of light, okay, which are collected by your photodetectors. And these photodetectors are positioned at a variety of angles around the capillary tube. So the cross-sectional area, the size or complexity and granularity of the particles are identified, and these are the basis for classifying the cells. The fluorescent molecules or fluorochromes may be attached to the particles, and they will also excite an incident light, which you call your fluorescent emission. So this is an example of your flow cytometry. Okay. So this is your area where your cell suspension are placed. Okay. And this is your sheet fluid. It is around your tube. So they go in single file. Okay. And the fluid around it pushes the particles at the center. And then they will pass through the laser beam, and they will incite your particles. You will have a forward scatter of light. Mag-scattering ka ng light. This is your forward scatter. And the forward scatter will determine the cell size. No? But you also have your, what you call your 90 degrees scatter. No? Your 90 degrees scatter, or right angle scatter, this one. Okay. Right angle yan. Eh. And this will identify the cell granularity and nuclear irregularity. Okay. So the light scattering at the different angles will distinguish already the difference in size and internal complexity of the cell that is being identified. Okay. But in addition, you can also add your fluorescent label. Okay. And the fluorescent label will also be identified. Okay. So dito meron kang isang photo detector which will identify one of your fluorescent level and another one for another fluorescent level. So this will identify the cell surface and cytoplasmic antigens that you want to identify. No? So kasi yung mga antigens, okay, you can use an antibody to identify that. If the antigen and antibody are complementary to each other, they will react with each other, and you will identify the antibodies, which is labeled with your fluorochrome. Okay. So this is how your flow cytometry works. No? So antigens that you need to identify in order to identify your clonal proliferation can be used for this purpose. So you can identify the malignancy for diagnosis using your cytometry. But there are many other uses of your flow cytometry. Okay. So these are the specimens that you can use for your flow cytometry. You can use whole blood, bone marrow, usually for hematopoietic malignancies, serous cavity fluids for metastasis, CSF, urine, and solid tumors. Okay. But the most important application of flow cytometry is in your hematopoietic neoplasia. Okay. So you can use that for immunophenotyping so that you can identify the type of malignancy that is present, the type of leukemia or lymphoma that is present. So its major role is classification of your acute leukemias. Okay. Leukemias now are identified or diagnosed by means of the different chromosomal abnormalities that are present. Okay. Ano bang translocation ang meron, ano bang deletion ang meron, and so on and so forth. And in addition, of course, your neoplastic cells express patterns of antigen that are distinctly different from those of their normal counterparts. Okay, so you can have gain of antigens that are not normally expressed, abnormally increased or decreased levels of antigens. You can also have asynchronous antigen expression of antigens normally expressed by a cell type but at an inappropriate time during maturation, abnormally homogeneous expression of one or more antigens by a population that normally exhibits a heterogeneous expression. Okay. So you use it for diagnosis and classification, identify the abnormal subpopulation of cells, assign lineage, and determine maturational states. Kasi may mga antigens that are determined in different stages of maturation of your hematopoietic cells. Assessment of biological parameters associated with prognosis. For example, CD38 or SAP70 in chronic lymphocytic leukemia is a poor long-term survival indicator. So if you know that your patient have a poor survival rate. Detection of antigens used as therapeutic targets. Okay, so again, this is your targeted therapy. So if you identify CD33 antigen in AML, then you can use your antibodies against your CD33 in the form of your gistosumab, okay, or ozogamicin. Detection of residual neoplastic cells following therapy. So even if you have a very few number of neoplastic cells, they can be identified by flow cytometry. Okay, so that is the end of the lecture. Do you have any question?